Hello, welcome back to Storytime with Keiran. So last time we left off at Chapter 7 of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, so we'll carry on from there. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is a wholly remarkable book. It's been compiled and recompiled many times over many years and under many different editorships. It contains contributions from countless numbers of travellers and researchers. The introduction begins like this. Space, it says, is big. Really big. You just won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big it is. I mean, you might think it's a long way down the road to the chemist, but that's just peanuts to space. Listen, and so on. After a while, the style settles down a bit, and it begins to tell you things that you really need to know, like the fact that the fabulously beautiful planet Bevselamin? Let's go with Bevselamin. Is now so worried about the cumulative erosion by 10 billion visiting tourists a year that any net imbalance between the amount you eat and the amount you excrete whilst on the planet is surgically removed from your body weight when you leave. So every time you go to the lavatory there, it is vitally important to get a receipt. To be fair though, when confronted by the sheer enormity of the distances between the stars, better minds than the one responsible for the guide's introduction have faltered. Some invite you to consider a moment a peanut in Reading, and a small walnut in Johannesburg, and other such dizzying concepts. The simple truth is that interstellar distances will not fit into the human imagination. Even light, which travels so fast that it takes most races thousands of years to realise that it travels at all, takes time to journey between the stars. It takes 8 minutes to journey from the star Sol to the place where Earth used to be, and 4 years more to arrive at Sol's nearest stellar neighbour, Alpha Proxima. For light to reach the other side of the galaxy, for it to reach Damodran, for instance, takes rather longer, 500,000 years. The record for hitchhiking this distance is just under 5 years, but you don't get to see much on the way. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy says that if you hold a lungful of air, you can survive in the total vacuum of space for about 30 seconds. However, it does go on to say that what with space being the mind-boggling size it is, the chances of getting picked up by another ship within those 30 seconds are 2 to the power of 276,709 to 1 against. By a totally staggering coincidence, that is also the telephone number of an Islington flat where Arthur once met to a very good party and met a very nice girl whom he totally failed to get off with. She went off with a gatecrasher. Though the planet Earth, the Islington flat, and the telephone have all now been demolished, it is comforting to reflect that they are in all some small way commemorated by the fact that 29 seconds later, Ford and Arthur were rescued. The computer chattered to itself in alarm as it noticed an airlock open and close itself for no apparent reason. This was because reason was in fact out to lunch. A hole had just appeared in the galaxy. It was exactly a nothingth of a second long, a nothingth of an inch wide, and quite a lot of millions of light years from end to end. As it closed up, lots of paper hats and party balloons fell out of it and drifted off through the universe. A team of 7 3-foot-high market analysts fell out of it and died, partly of asphyxiation, partly of surprise. 239,000 lightly fried eggs fell out of it too, materialising in a large wobbly heap on the famine-struck land of Pogrel in the Panzo system. The whole Pogrel tribe died out from famine except one last man, who died of cholesterol poisoning some weeks later. The nothingth of a second for which the whole existed reverberated backwards and forwards through time in a most improbable fashion. Somewhere in the deeply remote past, it seriously traumatised a small, random group of atoms drifting through the empty sterility of space, and made them cling together in most extraordinarily unlikely patterns. These patterns quickly learned to copy themselves. This was part of what was so extraordinary about the patterns, and went on to cause massive trouble on every planet they drifted to. That was how life began in the universe. 5 wild event maelstroms swirled in vicious storms of unreason and spewed up a pavement. On the pavement lay Ford Prefect and Arthur Dent, gulping like a half-spent fish.
"There you are," gasped Ford.
scrabbling for a fingerhold on the pavement as it raced through the third reach of the unknown. "I told you I'd think of something." "Oh, sure," said Arthur. "Sure." "Right idea of mine," said Ford. "To find a passing spaceship and get rescued by it." Yes, that's right, Ford Prefect is played by Tommy Wiseau. The real universe arched suddenly away beneath them. Various pretend ones flitted silently by like mountain goats. Primal light exploded, splattering space-time with gobbets of junket. Time blossomed, matter shrank away. The highest prime number coalesced quietly in a corner and hid itself away forever. "Oh, come off it," said Arthur. "The chances against it were astronomical." "Don't knock it, it would," said Ford. What sort of ship are we in?" asked Arthur as the pit of eternity yawned beneath them. "I don't know," said Ford. "I haven't opened my eyes yet." "No, nor have I," said Arthur. The universe jumped, froze, quivered, and split out in several unexpected directions. Ford and Arthur opened their eyes and looked about in considerable surprise. "Good God," said Arthur. "It looks just like the seafront at Southend." "I'm relieved to hear you say that," said Ford. "Why?" "Because I thought I must be going mad." "Perhaps you are." "Perhaps you only thought I said it." Ford thought about this. "Well, did you say it or didn't you?" he asked. "I think so," said Arthur. "Well, perhaps we're both going mad." "Yes," said Arthur. "We'd be mad, all things considered, to think this was Southend." "Well, do you think this is Southend?" "Oh, yes." "So do I." "Therefore we must be mad." "Nice day for it." "Yes," said a passing maniac. "Who was that?" asked Arthur. "Who? The man with 5 heads and elderberry bush full of kippers?" "Yes." "I don't know. Just someone." "Ah." They both sat down on the pavement and watched with a certain unease as huge children bounced heavily along the sand and wild horses thundered through the sky, taking fresh supplies of reinforced railings to the uncertain areas. "You know," said Arthur with a slight cough, "if this is Southend, there's something very odd about it." "You mean the way the sea stays steady as a rock, and the buildings keep washing up and down?" said Ford. "Yes, I thought that was a bit odd too. In fact," he continued, as with a huge bang, Southend split itself into 6 equal segments, which danced and spun giddily around each other in lewd and licentious formations. "There's something altogether very strange going on." White jowling noises of pipes and strings sheared through the wind. Hot doughnuts popped out of the road for 10 pence each. Horrid fish stormed out of the sky, and Arthur and Ford decided to make a run for it. They plunged through heavy walls of sound, mountains of archaic thought, valleys of mood music, bad suggestions, and footling bats, and suddenly heard a girl's voice. It sounded quite a sensible voice, but it just said, 2 to the power of 100,000 to 1 against and falling, and that was all. Ford skidded down a beam of light and span round to find a source for the voice, but could see nothing he could seriously believe in. "What was that voice?" shouted Arthur. "I don't know," yelled Ford. "I don't know. It sounded like a measurement of probability." "Probability? What do you mean?" "Probability, you know, like 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 5 to 4 against. It said 2 to the power of 100,000 to 1 against. Well, that's pretty improbable, you know." A 1,000,000-gallon vat of custard upended itself over them without warning. "But what does it mean?" cried Arthur. "What, the custard?" "No, the measurement of improbability." "I don't know. I don't know at all. I think we're on some kind of spaceship." "I can only assume," said Arthur, "that this is not the first-class compartment." Bulges appeared in the fabric of space-time. Great, ugly bulges. said Arthur, as he felt his body softening and bending in unusual directions. "Southend seems to be melting away. The stars are swirling, a dust bowl. My arms are drifting off into the sunset. My left arm's come off too." A frightening thought struck him. Hell, he said. How am I going to operate my digital watch now? He wound his eyes desperately around Ford's direction. Ford, he said, you're turning into a penguin. Stop it. Again came the voice. 2 to the power of 75,000 to 1 against and falling. Ford waddled around his pond in a furious circle. Hey, who are you? He quacked. Where are you? What's going on? I'm not anywhere stopping it. Yeah, that sounds very Dr. Penguin, sure. Please relax, said the voice pleasantly, like a stewardess in an airline with only one wing and 2 engines, one of which is on fire. You are perfectly safe. But that's not the point, raged Ford. The point is, I am now a perfectly safe penguin, and my colleague here is rapidly running out of limbs. It's all right, I've got them back now, said Arthur. 2 to the power of 50,000 to 1 against and falling, said the voice. Admittedly, said Arthur, they're longer than I usually like them, but... Isn't that anything? Squawked Ford in even fury. You feel you ought to be telling us? The voice cleared its throat. A giant petit four lolloped off into the distance. Welcome, said the voice, to the starship Heart of Gold. The voice continued. Please do not be alarmed, it said, by anything you see or hear around you. You are bound to feel some initial ill effects of you being rescued from certain death at a probability level of 2 to the power of 275,000 to 1 against, possibly much higher. We are now cruising at a level of 2 to the power of 25,000 to 1 against falling, and will be restoring normality just as soon as we are sure what normal is anyway. Thank you. 2 to the power of 20,000 to 1 against and falling. The voice cut out. Ford and Arthur were in a luminous, small pink cubicle. Ford was wildly excited. Arthur, he said, this is fantastic. We've been picked up by a ship powered by the infinite improbability drive. This is incredible. I heard rumours about it before. They were all officially denied, but they must have done it. They have built the improbability drive. Arthur, Arthur, what's happening? Arthur jammed himself against the door to the cubicle, trying to hold it closed, but it was ill-fitting. Tiny, furry little hands were squeezing themselves through the cracks. The fingers were ink stains, tiny voices chattered insanely. Arthur looked up. Ford, he said, there's an infinite number of monkeys outside who want to talk to us about the script of Hamlet they've worked out. The infinite improbability drive is a wonderful new method of crossing vast interstellar distances in a mere nothing of a second, without all that tedious mucking about in hyperspace. It was discovered by a lucky chance and then developed into a governmental form of propulsion by the Galactic Governance Research Team on Damodran. This, briefly, is the story of its discovery. The principle of generating small amounts of finite improbability by simply hooking up the logic circuits of a Bamble-Weenie 57 sub-meson brain to an atomic vector plotter suspended in a strong Brownian motion producer, say a nice cup of tea, were of course well understood, and by such generators were often used to break the ice at parties by making all the molecules in the hostess's undergarments leap simultaneously 1 foot to the left, in accordance with the theory of indeterminacy. Many respectable physicists said that they weren't going to stand for this, partly because it was a disbasement of science, but mostly because they didn't get invited to those sort of parties. Another thing they couldn't stand was the perpetual failure they encountered in trying to construct a machine which could generate the infinite improbability field needed to flip a spaceship across the mind-paralysing distances between the furthest stars, and in the end they grumpily announced that such a machine was virtually impossible. Then, one day, a student who'd been left to sweep up the lab after a particularly unsuccessful party found himself reasoning this way. If he thought to himself, such a machine is a virtual impossibility, then it must logically be a finite improbability. So all I have to do in order to make one is work out exactly how improbable it is, feed that figure into the finite improbability generator, give it a fresh cup of really hot tea, and turn it on. He did this, and was startled to discover that he had managed to create the long-sought-after golden infinite probability generator out of thin air. It startled him even more when, just after he was awarded the Galactic Institute's prize for extreme cleverness, he got lynched by a rampaging mob of respectable physicists who had finally realised that the one thing they really couldn't stand was a smartass. The improbability-proof control cabin of the Heart of Gold looked like a perfectly conventional spaceship, except it was perfectly clean because it was so new. Some of the control seats hadn't had the plastic wrapping taken off yet. The cabin was mostly white, oblong, and about the size of a smallish restaurant. In fact, it wasn't perfectly oblong. The two long walls were raked round in a slight parallel curve, and all the angles and corners of the cabin were contoured in excitingly chunky shapes. The truth of the matter is that it would have been a great deal simpler and more practical to build the cabin as an ordinary three-dimensional oblong room, but then the designers would have got miserable. As it was, the cabin looked excitingly purposeful, with large video screens ranged across the control and guidance system panels on the concave wall, and long banks of computers set into the convex wall. In one corner, a robot sat humped, its gleaming brushed steel head hanging loosely between its gleaming brushed steel knees. It, too, was fairly new, but though it was beautifully constructed and polished, it somehow looked as if the various parts of its more or less humanoid body didn't quite fit properly. In fact, they fitted perfectly well, but something in its bearing suggested that they might have fitted better. Zaphod Beeblebrox paced nervously up and down the cabin, brushing his hands over pieces of gleaming equipment and giggling with excitement. Trillian sat hunched over a clump of instruments, reading off figures. Her voice was carried around the tannoy system of the whole ship. 5-1 against Folly, she said. 4-1 against Folly. 3-1, 2, 1. Probability factor of 1-1. We have normality. I repeat, we have normality. She turned her microphone off, then turned it back on with a slight smile and continued. Anything you still can't cope with is therefore your own problem. Please relax. You'll be sent for soon. Zaphod burst out in annoyance. Who are they, Trillian? Trillian span her seat round to face him and shrugged. Just a couple of guys who seem to have picked up in open space, she said. Section ZZ9, plural Z, Alpha. Yeah, well, that's a sweet thought, Trillian, complained Zaphod. But do you really think it's wise under the circumstances? I mean, here we are on the run and everything. We must have to police or half the galaxy after us now. And we stop to pick up hitchhikers? Okay, so 10 out of 10 for style, but minus several million for good thinking, yeah? He tapped irritably at a control panel. Trillian quietly moved his hand before he tapped anything important. Whatever Zaphod's qualities of mind might include, dash, bravado, conceit, he was mechanically inept and could easily blow the ship up with an extravagant gesture. Trillian had come to suspect that the main reason why he had such a wild and successful life was that he never really understood the significance of anything he did. Zaphod, she said patiently, they were floating in unprotected space. You wouldn't want them to have died, would you? Well, no, not as such, but... Not as such? Not die as such? But... Trillian cocked her head on one side. Well, maybe someone else might have picked them up later. A second later, and they would have been dead. Yeah, so if you'd taken the trouble to think about the problem a little longer, it would have gone away. You'd have been happy to let them die? Well, not happy as such, but... Anyway, said Trillian, turning back to the controls, I didn't pick them up. What do you mean? Who picked them up then? The ship did. Huh? The ship did. All by itself. Huh? Whilst we were in probability drive. Well, that's incredible. No, Zaphod. Just very, very improbable. Yeah. Look, Zaphod, she said, patting his arm. Don't worry about the aliens. They're just a couple of guys, I suspect. I'll send a robot down to get them and bring them up there. Hey, Marvin! In the corner, the robot's head swung up sharply, but then wobbled about imperceptibly. It pulled itself up to its feet as if it was about 5 pounds heavier than it actually was, and what made an outside observer would have thought was an heroic effort to cross the room. It stopped in front of Trillian and seemed to stare through her left shoulder. I think you ought to know I'm feeling very depressed, it said. His voice was low and hopeless. Oh, God, muttered Zaphod and slumped into a seat. Well, said Trillian in a bright, compassionate tone, here's something to occupy you and keep your mind off things. It won't work, droned Marvin. I have an exceptionally large mind. Marvin, warned Trillian. All right, said Marvin. What do you want me to do? Go down to number 2 entry bay and bring up the 2 aliens here under surveillance. With a microsecond pause and a finely calculated micromodulation of pitch and timbre, nothing you should actually take offence at, Marvin managed to convey his utter contempt and horror for all things human. Just that, he said. Yes, said Trillian firmly. I won't enjoy it, said Marvin. Zaphod leapt out of his seat. She's not asking you to enjoy it, he shouted. Just do it, will you? All right, said Marvin like the tolling of a great cracked bell. I'll do it. Good, snapped Zaphod. Great. Thank you. Marvin turned and lifted his flat-topped triangular red eyes towards him. I'm not getting you down at all, am I? He said pathetically. No, Marvin, looked at Trillian. That's just fine, really. I wouldn't like to think I was getting you down. No, don't worry about that, the look continued. You just act as naturally, and everything will be just fine. You sure you don't mind? Probed Marvin. No, Marvin, looked at Trillian. That's just fine, really, just part of life. Marvin flashed her an electronic look. Life, said Marvin. Don't talk to me about life. He turned hopelessly on his heel and lugged himself out of the cabin. With a satisfied hum and a click, the door closed behind him. I don't think I can stand that robot much longer, Zaphod, growled Trillian. The Encyclopedia Galactica defines a robot as a mechanical apparatus designed to do the work of a man. The marketing division of the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation defines a robot as your plastic pal who's fun to be with. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy defines the marketing division of the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation as a mindless bunch of jerks who'll be the first against the wall when the revolution comes. With a footnote to the effect that the editors would welcome applications from anyone interested in taking over the post of robotics correspondent. Curiously enough, an edition of the Encyclopedia Galactica that had the good fortune to fall through a time warp from 1,000 years in the future defined the marketing division of the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation as a bunch of mindless jerks who were the first against the wall when the revolution came. The pink cubicle had winked out of existence. The monkeys had sunk away to a better dimension. Ford and Arthur found themselves in an embarkation area of the ship. It was rather smart. I think this ship's brand new, said Ford. How can you tell? Asked Arthur. Have you got an exotic device for measuring the age of metal? No, I just found the sales brochure lying on the floor. It's a lot of the universe can be yours stuff. Ah, look, I was right. Ford jabbed at one of the pages and showed it to Arthur. It says, sensational new breakthrough in improbability physics. As soon as the ship's drive reaches infinite improbability, it passes through every point in the universe. Be the envy of other major governments. Wow, this is big league stuff. Ford hunted excitedly through the technical specs of the ship, occasionally gasping with astonishment at what he read. Clearly, the galactic astral technology had moved ahead during his years of exile. Arthur listened for a short while, but being unable to understand the vast majority of what Ford was saying, he began to let his mind wander, trailing his fingers along the edge of an incomprehensible computer bank. He reached out and pressed an invitingly large red button on a nearby panel. The panel lit up with the words, "Please do not press this button again." He shook himself. "Listen," said Ford, who was still engrossed in the sales brochure. "They make a big thing of the ship's cybernetics. A new generation of Cyrus Cybernetics Corporation robots and computers, with the new GPP feature." "GPP feature?" said Arthur. "What's that?" "Oh, it says genuine people personalities." "Oh," said Arthur. "Sounds ghastly." A voice behind him said, "It is." The voice was low and hopeless, and accompanied by a slight clanking sound. They span around and saw an abject steel man standing hunched in the doorway. "What?" they said. "Ghastly," continued Marvin. "It all is. Absolutely ghastly. Just don't even talk about it. Look at this door," he said, stepping through it. The irony circuit struck into his voice modulator as he mimicked the style of the sales brochure. "All the doors in this spaceship have a cheerful and sunny disposition. It is their pleasure to open for you and their satisfaction to close again with the knowledge of a job well done." As the door closed behind them, it became apparent that it did indeed have a satisfied, sigh-like quality to it. It said. Marvin regarded it with cold loathing, while his logic circuits chattered with disgust, and tinkered with the concept of directing physical violence against it. Further circuits cut in, saying, "Why bother? What's the point? Nothing is worth getting involved in." Further circuits amused themselves by analysing the molecular components of the door and of the humanoid's brain cells. For a quick encore, they measured the level of hydrogen emissions in the surrounding cubic parsec of space, and then shut it down again in boredom. A spasm of despair shook the robot's body as he turned. "Come on," he droned. "I've been ordered to take you down to the bridge. Here I am, brain the size of a planet, and they asked me to take you down to the bridge. Call that job satisfaction? 'Cause I don't." He turned and walked to the hated door. "Excuse me," said Ford, following after him. "Which government owns this ship?" Marvin ignored him. "You watch this door," he muttered. "It's about to open again. I can tell by the intolerable air of smugness it suddenly generates." With an integrating little while, the door slid open and Marvin stomped through. "Come on." The others followed quickly, and the door slid back into place, with pleased little clicks and whirs. "Thank you, the marketing division of the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation," said Marvin, and trudged desolately up the gleaming curved corridor that stretched out before them. "Let's build robots with genuine people personalities," they said. "So they tried it out with me. I'm a personality prototype. You can tell, can't you?" Ford and Arthur muttered embarrassed little disclaimers. "I hate that door," continued Marvin. "I'm not getting you down at all, am I?" "Which government?" started Ford again. "No government owns it," snapped the robot. "It's been stolen." "Stolen?" "Stolen," mimicked Marvin. "Who by?" "Zaphod Beeblebrox." Something extraordinary happened to Ford's face. At least 5 separate and distinct expressions of shock and amazement piled up on it in a jumbled mess. His left leg, which was in mid-stride, seemed to have difficulty in finding the floor again. He stared at the robot and tried to entangle some darkling muscles. "Zaphod Beeblebrox?" he said weakly. "Sorry. Did I say something wrong?" said Marvin, dragging himself on regardless. "Pardon me for breathing, which I never do anyway, so I don't know why I bothered to say it. Oh God, I'm so depressed. Here's another one of those self-satisfied doors. Life. Don't talk to me about life. No one even mentioned it, muttered Arthur irritably. Ford, are you alright? Ford stared at him. Did that robot say Zaphod Beeblebrox? He said. A loud clatter of gunk music floated through the heart of gold cabin as Zaphod searched the sub-ether radio wavebands for news of himself. The machine was rather difficult to operate. For years, radios had been operated by means of pressing buttons and turning dials. Then, as the technology became more sophisticated, the controls were made touch-sensitive. You merely had to brush the panels with your fingers. Now, all you had to do was wave your hand in the general direction of the components and hope. It saved a lot of muscular expenditure, of course, but that meant you had to sit infuriatingly still if you had to keep listening to the same program. Zaphod waved a hand and the channel switched. Again, more gunk music, but this time as a background to a news announcement. The news was always heavily edited to fit the rhythms of the music. And news reports brought to you here on the sub-ether waveband, broadcasting around the galaxy around the clock, sobbed a voice. And here I will be saying a big hello to all intelligent life forms everywhere. And to everyone else out there, the secret is to bind rocks together, guys. And of course, the big news story tonight is a sensational theft of the new improbability drive prototype ship by none other than Galactic President Zaphod Beeblebrox. And the big question everyone asking is, has the big Z finally flipped? Beeblebrox, the man who invented the pan-galactic Gargle Blaster, ex-confidence trickster, once described by encyclopedists as the best bind since the big one, and recently voted the worst transsentient being in the known universe for the 7th time. Has he got an answer this time? We asked his private brain case specialist, Garrett Halfront. The music swirled and died for a moment. Another voice broke in, presumably Halfront. He said, "Well, Zaphod's just this guy, you know." But it got no further because an electronic pencil flew across the cabin and turned off the radio's on-off sensitive airspace. Zaphod turned and glared at Trillian. She had thrown the pencil. "Hey," he said, "what do you do that for? He's turned into a New Yorker now. Here we go." Oh dear. Trillian was tapping her finger on a screenful of figures. "I just saw her something," she said. "Yeah? Worth interrupting a news bulletin about me for?" "You hear enough about yourself as it is." "I'm very insecure. We know that." "Can we drop your ego for a moment? This is important." "If there's anything more important than my ego around, I want it cut and shot now." Zaphod glared at her again, then laughed. "Listen," she said. "They picked up those couple of guys." "What couple of guys?" "The couple of guys we picked up." "Oh yeah," said Zaphod. "Those couple of guys." "We picked them up in sector ZZ9 plural Z alpha." "Yeah?" said Zaphod, and blinked. Trillian said quietly, "Does that mean anything to you?" Said Zaphod. ZZ9 plural Z alpha. ZZ9 plural Z alpha. "Well," said Trillian. What does the Z mean?" said Zaphod. "Which one?" "Anyone." One of the major difficulties Trillian experienced in her relationship with Zaphod was learning to distinguish between him pretending to be stupid just to get people off their guard, pretending to be stupid because he couldn't be bothered to think and wanted someone else to do it for him, pretending to be outrageously stupid to find the fact he actually didn't understand what was going on, and being really, genuinely stupid. He was renowned for being amazingly clever, and quite clearly was so, but not all of the time, which obviously worried him, hence the act. He preferred people to be puzzled rather than contemptuous. This, above all, appeared to Trillian to be genuinely stupid, but she could no longer be bothered to argue with it. She sighed and punched up a star map on the viz screen, so she could make it simple for him, whatever his reasons for wanting it to be that way. "There," she pointed. "Right there." "Hey, yeah!" said Zaphod. Well, she said. Well, what? Parts of the inside of her head screamed at other parts of the inside of her head. She said, very calmly, it's the same sector you originally picked me up in. He looked at her, then looked back at the screen. Hey, yeah, he said. Now that is wild. We should have zapped straight through into the middle of Horsehead Nebula. How did we come to be there? I mean, that's nowhere. She ignored this. Improbability drive, she said patiently. You explained it to me yourself. We pass through every point in the universe. You know that. Yeah, but that's one wild coincidence, isn't it? Yes. Picking up someone at that point? Out of the whole of the universe to choose from? That's just too... I want to work this out. Computer! The Sirius Cybernetics shipboard computer, which controlled and permeated every particle of the ship, switched into communication mode. Hi there! It said brightly and simultaneously spewed out a tiny ribbon of detector tape just for the record. Detector tape said, Hi there. Oh, God, said Zaphod. He hadn't worked with the computer for long, but he'd already learned to loathe it. The computer continued, brash and as cheery as if it was selling detergent. I want you to know that whatever your problem, I am here to help you solve it. Yeah, said Zaphod. Look, I think I'll just use a piece of paper. Sure thing, said the computer, spilling out its message into a waste paper bin at the same time. I understand. If you ever want... Shut up, said Zaphod. Snatching up a pencil, he sat down next to Trillian at the console. Okay, said the computer in a hurt tone of voice, closing its speech channel again. Zaphod and Trillian pored over the figures that the probability flight path scanner flashed up silently in front of them. Can we work out, said Zaphod, from their point of view, what the improbability of that rescue was? Yes, that's a constant, said Trillian. 2 to the power of 276,709 to 1 against. That's high. They're two lucky guys. Yes. But relative to what we were doing when the ship picked them up, Trillian punched up the figures. They show 2 to the power of infinity minus 1 to 1 against. An irrational number that has only a conventional meaning in probability physics. That's pretty low, continued Zaphod with a slight whistle. Yes, agreed Trillian, and looked at him quizzically. That's one big whack of improbability to be accounted for. But something pretty improbable has to show up on the balance sheet if it's all going to add up into a pretty sum. Zaphod scribbled a few sums, crossed them out, and threw the pencil away. That's dudes, I can't work it out. Well? Zaphod knocked his two heads together in irritation and gritted his teeth. Okay, he said. Computer! The voice circuit sprang into life again. Why, hello there, they said. Ticker tape. All I want to do is make your day nicer and nicer and nicer. Well, shut up and work something out for me. Sure thing, shouted the computer. You want a probability forecast based on improbability data, yeah. Okay, the computer continued. Here's an interesting little notion. Did you realize that most people's lives are governed by telephone numbers? A pained look crawled across one of Zaphod's faces and onto the other one. Have you flipped? He said. No, but you will when I tell you that. Trillian gasped. She scrabbled at the buttons in the improbability flight path screen. Telephone number, she said. Did that thing say telephone number? Numbers flashed up on the screen. The computer had paused politely, but it now continued. When I was about to say that... Please don't bother, said Trillian. Look, what is this? Said Zaphod. I don't know, said Trillian. But those aliens... They're on their way up to the bridge with that wretched robot. Can we put them up on any motion cameras? Marvin trudged down the corridor, still moaning. And then, of course, I brought this terrible pain in all the diodes down my left-hand side. No, said Alfred grimly, as he walked along beside him. Really? Oh, yes, said Marvin. I mean, I've asked them to be replaced, but no one ever listens. I can imagine. Vague whistling and humming noises were coming from Ford. Well, 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 he kept saying to himself. Zaphod Beeblebrox. Suddenly Marvin stopped and held up a hand. You know what's happened now, of course. No, what? Said Arthur, who didn't want to know. We've arrived at another one of those doors. There was a sliding door set into the side of the corridor. Marvin eyed it suspiciously. Well, said Ford impatiently, do we go through? Do we go through? Mimicked Marvin. Yes. This is the entrance to the bridge. I was told to take you to the bridge. Probably the highest demand that will be made on intellectual capacities today, I wouldn't wonder. Slowly, with great loathing, he stepped towards the door, like a hunter stalking his prey. Suddenly, it slid open. Thank you, it said, for making a simple door very happy. Deep in Marvin's forehead, ears ground. Funny, he intoned funereally. How just when you think life can't get possibly any worse, it suddenly does. He heaved himself through the door and left Ford and Arthur staring at each other and shrugging their shoulders. From inside they heard Marvin's voice again. I suppose you want to see the aliens now, he said. Do you want me to sit in a corner and rust, or just fall apart where I'm standing? Yeah, just show them in, would you, Marvin? Came another voice. Arthur looked at Ford and was astonished to see him laughing. What's... Shh, said Ford. Come on in. He stepped through into the bridge. Arthur followed him nervously, and was astonished to see a man lolling back in a chair with his feet on the control console, picking the teeth with his right hand head with his left hand. The right-hand head seemed to be thoroughly preoccupied with his task, but the left-hand one was grinning a broad, relaxed, nonchalant grin. The number of things Arthur couldn't believe he was seeing was fairly large. His jaw flopped about at a loose end for a while. The peculiar man waved a lazy hand at Ford, and with an appalling affectation of nonchalance said, Ford, hi, how are you? Glad you could drop in. Ford was not going to be outcooled. Zaphod, he drawled. Great to see you. You're looking well. The extra arm suits you. Nice ship you've stolen. Arthur goggled at him. Even you know this guy, he said, waving a wild finger at Zaphod. Know him? Exclaimed Ford. He's... He paused and decided to do the introductions the other way round. Oh, Zaphod, this is a friend of mine. Arthur Dent, he said. I saved him when his planet blew up. Oh, sure, said Zaphod. Hi, Arthur. Glad you could make it. His right-hand head looked around casually, said, Hi, and went back to having its teeth picked. And Ford carried on. And Arthur, he said, this is my semi-cousin Zaphod Beep. We've met, said Arthur sharply. When you're cruising down the road in a fast lane, and you'll lazily sail past a few hard-driving cars, and are feeling pretty pleased with yourself, then accidentally change down from fourth to first, instead of third, thus making your engine leap out of your bonnet in a rather ugly mess, it tends to throw you off your stride, in much the same way that this remark threw Ford Prefect off his. What? He said. I said we've met. Zaphod gave an awkward start of surprise, and jabbed the drum sharply. Hey, have we? Hey, Ford rounded on Arthur with an angry flash in his eyes. Now he felt he was back on home ground. He suddenly began to resent having lumbered himself with this ignorant primitive who knew as much about the affairs of the galaxy as an Ilford-based gnat knew about life in Peking. What do you mean you've met? He demanded. This is Zaphod Beeblebrox from Beetlejuice 5, you know. Not bloody Martin Smith from Croydon. I don't care, said Arthur coldly. We've met, haven't we, Zaphod Beeblebrox? Or should I say, Phil? What? Shouted Ford. You'll have to remind me, said Zaphod. I've a terrible memory for species. It was at a party, pursued Arthur. Yeah, well, I don't doubt that, said Zaphod. Cool it, will you, Arthur? Demanded Ford. Arthur would not be deterred. A party 6 months ago, on Earth, England. Zaphod shook his head with a tight-lipped smile. London, insisted Arthur. Islington. Oh, said Zaphod with a dog to start. That party. This wasn't fair on Ford at all. He looked backwards and forwards between Arthur and Zaphod. What? He said to Zaphod. You don't mean to say you've been on that miserable little planet as well, do you? No, of course not, said Zaphod breezily. Well, I may have dropped in briefly, you know, on my way somewhere. But I was stuck there for 15 years. Well, I didn't know that, did I? But what were you doing there? Looking about, you know. He'd great chance to party, said Arthur, trembling with anger. A fancy dress party. Well, it would have to be, wouldn't it? Said Ford. At this party, persisted Arthur, was a girl. Oh, well, look, it doesn't matter now. The whole place has gone up in smoke anyway. I wish you would stop sulking about our bloody planet, said Ford. Who was the lady? Oh, just somebody. Well, all right. I wasn't doing very well with her. I've been trying all evening. Hell, she was something, though. Beautiful, charming, devastatingly intelligent. At last I got her to myself for a bit, and was plying her with a bit of talk when this friend of yours barges up and says, Hey, doll, is this guy bothering you? Why don't you talk to me instead? I'm from a different planet. I never saw her again. Zaphod? Exclaimed Ford. Yes, said Arthur, glaring at him and trying not to feel foolish. He only had the 2 arms and 1 head then, and he called himself Phil, But you must admit he did turn out to be from another planet, said Trillian, wandering into sight at the other end of the bridge. She gave Arthur a pleasant smile, which settled on him like a ton of bricks, and then turned her attention to the ship's controls again. There was silence for a few seconds. Then out of the scrambled mess of Arthur's brain crawled some words. Tricia McMillan, he said. What are you doing here? Same as you, she said. I hitched a lift. After all, with a degree in maths and another in astrophysics, what else was there to do? It was either that or the dole queue again on Monday. Infinity -1, chattered the computer. And probability sum now complete. Zaphod looked about him, at Ford, at Arthur, and then at Trillian. Trillian, he said. Is this sort of thing going to happen every time we use the improbability drive? Very probably, I'm afraid, she said. The Heart of Gold fled on silently through the night of space, now in conventional photon drive. Its crew of 4 were ill at ease, knowing they'd been brought together not out of their own volition, or by simple coincidence, but by some curious perversion of physics, as if relationships between people were susceptible to the same laws that governed the relationships between atoms and molecules. As the ship's artificial night closed in, they were each grateful to retire to separate cabins and tried to rationalise their thoughts. Trillian couldn't sleep. She sat on a couch and stared at a small cage, which contained her last and only links with Earth, 2 white mice that she had insisted Zaphod let her bring. She had expected never to see the planet again, but she was disturbed by the negative reaction to the news of the planet's destruction. It seemed remote and unreal. She could find no thoughts to think about it. She watched the mice scurrying around the cage and running furiously in their little plastic treadwheels, till they occupied her whole attention. Suddenly she shook herself and went back onto the bridge to watch over the tiny flashing lights and figures that charted the ship's progress through the void. She wished she knew what it was she was trying not to think about. Zaphod couldn't sleep. He also wished he knew what it was that he wouldn't let himself think about. For as long as he couldn't remember, he had suffered from a vague nagging feeling of not being all there. Most of the time, he was able to put this thought aside and not worry about it, but had been reawakened by the sudden, inexplicable arrival of Ford Prefect and Arthur Dent. Somehow, it seemed to conform to a pattern he couldn't see. Ford couldn't sleep. He was too excited about being back on the road again. 15 years of virtual imprisonment were over, and he was just as he was finally beginning to give up hope. Knocking about with Zaphod for a bit promised to be a lot of fun. although there seemed to be something faintly odd about his semi-cousin that he couldn't put his finger on. The fact that he had become president of the galaxy was frankly astonishing, as was some of the manner of his leaving the post. Was there a reason behind it? There would be no point in asking Zaphod. He never appeared to have a reason for anything he did at all. He had turned unfathomability into an art form. He attacked everything in life with a mixture of extraordinary genius and naive incompetence, and it was often difficult to tell which was which. Arthur slept. He was terribly tired. There was a tap at Zaphod's door. It slid open. Zaphod? Yeah? Trillian stood outlined in oval light. I think we've just found what you came to look for. Hey, yeah? Ford gave up in the attempt to sleep. In the corner of his cabin was a small computer screen and keyboard. He sat at it for a while and tried to compose a new entry for the guide on the subject of Vogons, but couldn't think of any vitriolic enough, so he gave that up too, wrapped a robe around himself, and went for a walk to the bridge. As he entered, he was surprised to see two figures hunched excitedly over the instruments. See? The ship's about to move into orbit, Trillian was saying. There's a planet out there. It's at the exact coordinates you predicted. Zaphod heard a noise and looked up. Ford, he hissed. Hey, come and take a look at this. Ford went and had a look at it. It was a series of figures flickering over the screen. You recognize those galactic coordinates? Said Zaphod. No. I'll give you a clue. Computer. Hey, gang! Infused the computer. This is getting real sociable, isn't it? Shut up, said Zaphod. Show up the screens. Light on the bridge sank. Pinpoints of light played across the consoles and reflected in 4 pairs of eyes that stared up at the external monitor screens. There was absolutely nothing on them. Recognize that? Whispered Zaphod. Ford frowned. No, he said. What do you see? Nothing. Recognize it? What are you talking about? We're in the Horsehead Nebula. One whole vast dark cloud. And I was meant to recognize that from a blank screen? Inside a dark nebula is the only place in the galaxy you'd see a dark screen. Very good. Zaphod laughed. He was clearly very excited about something, almost childishly so. Hey, this is terrific. This is just far too much. What's so great about being stuck in a dust cloud? Said Ford. What do you reckon to find here? What would you reckon to find here? Heard Zaphod. Nothing. No stars. No planets. No. Computer, shouted Zaphod. Rotate angle of vision through 180 degrees and don't talk about it. For a moment, it seemed that nothing was happening. Then a brightness glowed at the edge of the huge screen. A red star the size of a small clip crept across it, followed quickly by another one, a binary system. Then a vast crescent slicing the corner of the picture, a red glare shading up into deep black, the night side of a planet. I found it! Cried Zaphod, thumping the console. I found it! Ford stared at it in astonishment. What is it? He said. That, said Zaphod, is the most improbable planet that ever existed. Boom. So that's where we'll leave off for today, with the discovery of the most improbable planet that has ever existed. Oh, indeed.